Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Lessons from the Front. You may have noticed that for a while there, we did not go live. We are back to a live audience. So welcome, everybody. And I would also like to welcome a good friend of Carry the Load. I am starting to become a good friend. Well, at least I hope I'm starting to become a good friend of this guy. His name is Scott. Scott has been on the board since day one and has seen this movement develop into what it is today. Scott Rohrman, welcome to Lessons from the Front.
Well, thanks for having me.
And I'm excited to talk to you because there are a couple of interesting things about Carry the Load. As much as I've been involved and as long as I've been involved, I have not been as involved as you have over this whole time. So I'm really anxious to hear about some of these things. And so I guess let's just kind of jump right into it. I mean, first of all, to give a little backdrop about you, Scott, you're a Dallas businessman who is very involved in the real estate world. But how in the world did you get involved in Carry the Load?
Yeah, great question. Clint Bruce, where a lot of things start. I was the troop committee chairman for Troop 82, Boy Scouts of America at Highland Park Presbyterian Church. And we had about 220 scouts in our program. And so Clint called one day out of the blue and said, I heard you're a big troop and I need some scouts to do some volunteer work for me on a event I'm putting together. I said, sure, we'd be happy to do that. When's the event? He goes, in 2 days. I said, no, we're not going to do that.
So wait a minute, let me get this straight. You got 2 days notice from Clint Bruce.
I know, isn't that odd?
That's weird. That's weird. He gave you a lot of time, at least by his standards.
I know. So, he figured out he had a live wire on the phone and 220 scouts. He didn't want to give that up. So I could see the gears running through his brain while we were on the phone. And he goes, well, I got something else y'all can get involved in. And I said, what's that? And he goes, Carry the Load. I said, okay, great. What is it? He said, well, we're trying to bring back the meaning of Memorial Day and all the other great things that we do. And I said, okay. He said, would you join our team? And I said, sure. So he goes, okay, we're meeting in a month and we're going to meet at this day at this time. I said, okay, great. So I showed up at Rena Morris's house, and Congressman Pete Sessions was there, and Jim Archer was there, and me and Clint and Rena. And we walk in and Clint starts talking and telling stories. And then finally we get down to business. And
that was an hour and a half later, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, it was a little bit, but they were fun stories. So then I realized this is the first meeting ever for Carry the Load. No one's ever met before. This is Clint's idea. And so I guess for good or bad, I was there at the beginning and we tried to figure out what to do and how to do it. So that's how I got involved and how it got started.
So you were the leader of a Boy Scout troop, and he calls and gives you a lot of notice, 2 days notice for another event. When you said, hey, you know what, I probably need a little more time there. Well, I got something else for you. The epitome of Clint Bruce sales.
Right.
I mean, honestly, he could probably give Zig Ziglar a run for his money. And so you show up at the very first ever, although you didn't realize it, if I just heard that correctly, that it was the first meeting.
That's right. And what was interesting is Stephen Holly had already been volunteering with our Boy Scout troop.
Okay. And so did you know Stephen then, you're saying?
I knew Stephen, but at the time when Clint called, I didn't know the connection.
Okay.
And when Stephen and I had actually tented together on a Boy Scout camp out, because the boys, have to do their own deal and the adults have to be close, but can't, And so Stephen and I knew each other. So it's a very interesting small world situation.
So describe that first meeting. What was it? Was it cheerleading? Was it, what were the emotions? What was the atmosphere? Because we know Clint when he sells, and when he sells, he's got a lot of energy and he's got a lot of bravado. But we also know that what really drove him to start this was quite honestly a lot of anger. What was the mood?
Whenever you're with Clint, it's almost always laughing and talking and telling stories. while it can also, in the middle of all that, be very solemn. And that's what this was. We were laughing and joking, but it was very solemn. It's very important to him and to Stephen, and now to a lot of people. You know, Todd, you've been in the military. I've never been in the military, but I appreciate everyone who is. And so it's a very solemn thing, but we had a lot of fun at the same time. So it was very interesting because Clint was an idea minute in that meeting, and Rena and Jim really pushed him to say, let's create an action plan. And, you know, for it could be pure coincidence. For me, it's a God thing, but it was right at the 100th anniversary of White Rock Lake. And Rena lives at White Rock Lake, and she was chairman of the 100th year celebration. And she said, we will do Carry the Load at White Rock Lake as part of the 100-year celebration. And as you know, in Dallas, we do a 20-hour, 22-hour march, and it's hard to get ability to get a curfew waiver. But Rena got that because she was head of the committee. And so luckily, all these things were already there that no one knew that fit really well into making Carry the Load work. So our first Carry the Load all-night event was at White Rock Lake. And it was amazing how great it went with very little planning and very little time to plan it. So it was really fun.
So I don't want to just keep beating on it, but that first meeting, I had no idea what you just said, that you showed up and it was like, oh, wow, this is the first meeting. I mean, was it, you know, describe your personal feelings. What were you feeling as Clint was going through why he wanted to do this and why he felt it was so important?
Well, it took a little bit for it to kick in. And when I realized this was the very first meeting, I was like, oh, wow, I don't have time for this. And I thought, how did I get sucked into this? And how do I get out of this? And then Clint said, let me just tell you how this started. And I can repeat the story. I'll try to tell it quickly. It's Memorial Day. His wife's mad at him because he's all bummed out. He's putting a black cloud over everything. And she's trying to get the girls ready to go go to a picnic with friends. And she says, can you get out of here? And he's like, why? She goes, you're moping around. He goes, well, this is the day I'm supposed to remember all the guys that I lost. And she said, I know, but we've got little girls. And she said, go do something. So he put on his rucksack, goes to White Rock Lake, starts hiking around. He tells it so much better than I do, but he's got his boots on, he's got his rucksack, and he's got his earbuds in, and an older man turns around and walks back to him and taps him on the shoulder and says, who you carrying? And that man had been in the military in a previous conflict to the Desert Storm. He was older, and he knew exactly what Clint was doing without even talking about it. He knew that Clint was carrying somebody. And that was the break in Clint's heart and mind. And he said, we gotta get people out walking and carrying a load, because all these great guys who aren't here anymore have carried a load for us. So that's how it started.
You know, I don't care how many times I hear that story, it still gives me goosebumps. And because we've all, you know, anyone who has lost someone in that type of service knows that feeling. And that story is really is a metaphor for the way everyone feels who has
Yeah.
lost someone in that situation.
Yeah.
So that when you heard that story, that's when it just kind of you
Yeah.
went, okay, close the door. I'm not leaving.
I'm in. How do I get involved? How do I do this? I'm in. I mean, I personally can't hear that story because in our second meeting, my son, who was an 8th grader at the time, came by the office. My wife, his mom dropped him off, and he was just sitting out in the deal because I had to take him to basketball practice or something. And when we finished our meeting, I introduced him to Clint, and Clint just straight up asked him, a little 8th grader, who you carrying? And my son said, what? And he said, who you carrying? And he said, And it clicked. And he said, my cousin, Dylan Johns, who's in Iraq, I don't know if it was Iraq right then, but he's in the Army. And so he goes, he is, he's who I'm carrying. So, I mean, that's all the communication that happened. And an eighth grader clicked in and understood what he knew. Clint was a Navy SEAL, so he got the military thing, but it clicked in pretty quickly. You don't have to explain it very much. It just happens.
Golly, that's an eighth grader just kind of picked up on it that fast. And I think that goes to show you how well in tune everyone became around Clint very quickly as this developed.
So then my son he got his Eagle Scout rank right at the beginning of his 9th grade year. He decided that his Eagle Scout project would be carry the load. And so what he did was he went out and interviewed first responders and military and asked them for their stories. And so it's very crude. Now we have these really wonderful posters with pictures and the story of the soldier or the first responder. But my son Jack was the first one to do the biographies at the deal. And so he got all his buddies to come out, and they went to—
Is that right?
Yeah, they went to the fire station and interviewed the guys at the fire station who had just lost a fireman in a fire. And the fire station, the firemen, they weren't talking. And finally, one of the guys came up to me and said, would you mind walking outside, just sitting in your car for a while? And I said, why? And he goes, they'll open up to your son, but they won't open up with an adult here who doesn't know their story, but they'll tell him. My son came out crying. And he said, Dad, these guys are amazing. And so he handed out biographies all along the trail during the first carry the load. And that was his Eagle Scout project. Well, it was amazing because he would be in our living room and he would call people. So he called a Dallas police officer who had been shot. A guy ambushed him with an AK-47, shot him 6 times. The guy was in the hospital for 6 months. And I could hear Jack talking to him, and he said, so you have an artificial leg? And he said, yeah. And he said, and you're going back into the Dallas police force? He goes, yeah, I'm so excited. I just started back a month ago. It took me 6 months in the hospital and 6 months of rehab, but I'm back on the force. And he said, why would you do that? And he told me the other side of the conversation later. He goes, it's who I am. And so as an 8th grade boy, listening to a man who had been shot, who had been in the hospital that long, go back on the force because it's who he is. If it weren't for Carry the Load, those stories wouldn't be being told, especially to our younger citizens.
Well, and honestly, you just shared with me something I wasn't aware of. So the storyboards that have really become synonymous with Carry the Load was really started as a result of your son's Eagle Scout project. Am I getting that right?
Well, yeah. I mean, check it out with Clint. Make sure I'm not fibbing, but that's what he did, and he didn't have time or the ability to get storyboards, but yeah, he did biographies and handed them out to people so they could read them as they walked along the trail at White Rock.
So I want to zero in on that because I think that is amazing. I think it shows evolution of something like this more than anything else. That is now, again, the storyboards are a staple of Carry the Load, whether you're on the relay, whether you're at the march itself, events that we have separate from either of those, the storyboards are always there. And it started out, I mean, what's now become, Revershawn's Katy Trail is lined with these storyboards. Does your son, has he ever had a conversation with you? Dad, I had no idea it was going to develop to this. His project led to those storyboards, which have led to, other aspects like Reflection Ridge. It was all started by your son. I never knew that. And if he hasn't realized that, he needs to.
He has. Maybe he could realize it more. But yeah, he's proud of that. Yeah,
he should be. I mean, it really is the best indicator of who we are meaning that they live, those who have made the ultimate sacrifice continue to live and breathe with us by way of that, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And that came from a ninth grader.
Yeah, right between it. Well, it was in May, so it was right before his ninth grade year. Yeah.
That's amazing. And for anyone who says that we can't learn from our kids,
I know.
that right there is the perfect story.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So
So in that first year, there's a couple things that happened that were just amazing. We didn't know what we were doing. And so White Rock, we went one way around White Rock. And so people didn't get the camaraderie that they get on the Katy Trail, because you go back and forth and you pass people and you see them and stuff. So at White Rock, a lot of people ended up spending a lot of time alone in that 20 hours, because everybody was walking one direction. So if somebody was going faster, they'd pass them, but they didn't see their face, you know? And so I liked the Rivershun, passing people and you go back and forth and so forth. And I wouldn't want to change that, but there were some cool things that happened with people spending so much time alone, walking in one direction all the way around the lake, which it's an 8 or 10 mile loop. And so so at 1 a.m, Rena and I were driving in a little, Kawasaki Mule to make sure people were okay, because nobody knew what was going to happen. It was hot. It was blistery wind, and we didn't have socks for people, and people didn't think to bring socks. And so blisters were going out the wazoo. People were getting hydrated. So we went and bought a bunch of waters, and we were driving the mule in reverse order around the lake to try to get with people and say, can we help you? If you've got too many blisters, we'll carry you into first aid and so forth. It's 1 a.m, pitch black, and there's this guy there walking backwards. And we said, can we help you? And he goes, no, I'm good. He wasn't very talkative. We said, really, you're walking back? Why are you walking backwards? He goes, I'm good. And we couldn't let it go. We said, well, what's the deal? He goes, well, I got so many blisters on my feet because I hadn't walked this much in a long time. But I can't walk forward, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to walk backwards. It tears me up every time. And I said, why don't you just stop? And he said, my older brother was 13 years older than me, and he died in Vietnam. I never knew him, and I was always pissed. And now every time I take a step, some of that anger goes away. I got to keep walking. So that was a pretty cool story.
Oh my God. Scott, there aren't many times where I'm kind of speechless doing this, but this may be one of them. Those stories, I think for those of us who have been involved for more than a year, they're all over the place. And it's why we encourage people to get out there and walk. I mean, those stories are one thing to be told. They're another thing to be experienced. There are countless stories of people who along the trail, they feel the presence of those they're carrying. They feel the presence of those who are out there lined along the path. It is one of
other
the most,
people who are carrying heavy loads. You're walking down the trail and you see somebody else and you go, wow, I'm not the only one who has to carry a really heavy load here. So it's really healing.
And I think that's been one of the things that has been most satisfying to me, and watching some of these families out there who realize they're not alone. And, when people say, they say, hey, describe it. And it's a hard thing to describe. The whole idea of the Memorial March, it's a hard thing to describe. But when you explain to people that just get out there and walk alongside somebody, just so they know that the death of their loved one still matters. Because those stories, like you just said, I don't know what that guy's relationship was to anyone out there. He didn't have to, but he just had to know that there were people that cared. It gave him an outlet to let other, or it gave him an outlet to be closer to his brother.
Yeah. 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 And
So
I never even saw him again after that 1 o'clock in the morning deal. But I know that Carry the Load did something for him, and his story did something for me.
So when we describe this to people, I know you and I have talked about this at one point. This is way more than a nonprofit. It's way more than a charity. It's, a lot of us, I think, have really kind of come to describe this as a movement. It's a movement to help people. Like you said, every step he took, it helped him. It helped heal him. And that's what we want people to understand, as we come up. This is our 10th anniversary. I mean, officially, Scott, this is our 10th anniversary. And, where a lot of organizations measure their success through dollars raised, ours is a little more subjective. And we like to think of, we measure our success by how many people we heal and how many people we touch. Do you ever just sit back and go, oh my God, had I closed the door? You described that first meeting. Where's the door? How do I get up? How do I get out of here? How do I not get involved? I mean, what if you'd have gotten up and walked out?
Yeah.
Left
I would have missed out. I think it would have gone without me. And I think I would have missed out on just rich blessings that have occurred. I mean, it's been amazing to see how Carry the Load has gone from that first meeting to where it is now. You're on the board. We've got great people on the board. At the beginning, it was Clint, Steven, me, and Rena. And I mean, it was, and so we kept saying we have to enlarge the board. And I kept saying, okay, but what are we going to tell them we're about? What are we going to tell them? What are the vision? And now that's all there. And so it's really phenomenal. So I'm really glad I didn't get up and walk out, because I would have missed out on a lot of rich blessings, seeing all the things that have happened. And it's the other thing is I never would have known about Heroes on the Water. And when they took these guys fishing, there was a wealthy guy who brought some people, and he goes, we want these guys to catch fish. We'll take them to Texoma on my yacht, and we'll put them right there. We'll catch all kinds of fish. And the Heroes guys said, that's not the deal. The deal is we're putting them in a kayak on a body of water, and we're turning them over. Now, these are paraplegics, quadriplegics, and they have to get in the kayak and get out of the water, and then they can start fishing. And these guys are transformed. It's the first time they've been in control of their life in a long time. So, Kill 22 and just all the other charities that I would never have known about, now I'm blessed by those guys. So Carry the Load has opened a lot. And, you said something, you used the word subjective. There are a lot of subjective blessings and benefits and wonderful things that come out of Carry the Load. But I'm also very proud of Carry the Load in that we are very, very careful with the money. We watch how we spend the money. Our administrative costs are really low, and we give away over $1 million every year to all of these other charities. We use some of the money for our own programs, but we give away a whole lot of money every year, rather than building a staff, rather than making it all about Carry the Load. We're actually helping other people and other people who are serving people. And so I know you've been on the committee, vetting the nonprofits to whom we give money. And I just really think that's great too. So it's not all about Carry the Load. It's about service to others.
Yeah. I want you to kind of zero in a little bit, for those of you who are not familiar with all aspects of Carry the Load. Scott was referencing Heroes on the Water, pretty much our first nonprofit partner. And one of the things that has developed through the years is picking these partners, because our main objective as an organization is to bring awareness to people that these other organizations exist, that the need to honor Memorial Day is the most important thing we could do because our freedoms are not free. Describe how how the nonprofit partner, from your standpoint, came about. Was it was it, hey, we've got to get money out? Was it, oh my God, money's coming in, we need to do something with it? What was your recollection of how the nonprofit partner piece came about?
Yeah, Clint was always very, very clear that it was not to be about us. And so from my very first understanding is if we raised any money at all, we were going to give most of it away. And Clint was very strong on first responders have to be involved. It's not just military. And he had some military buddies call him and be upset with him and say, Clint, what the heck is going on? Because Memorial Day is about military. And Clint had a very good answer, like he usually does. And he said, yeah, but when you're overseas serving our country, you wouldn't be able to do it if you didn't know your wife and kids were safe at home because of the first responders here. So they're a part of this plan. And so
I've taken that line from him and run with it so many times because it is so true.
Yeah,
it is so true.
So yeah, so it just was always about others, and so it's just been amazing to see that as the board has grown and changed, that every board member still has that priority, and they get it. And every volunteer and most of the participants, if not all, now we've got tens of thousands of people participating. But one of the when we went to Rivershon Park, I had a friend that I invited, and he said, okay, he didn't care about first responders, he didn't care about military. He saw it as, where can I go? And he's an ultra marathoner. Where can I go and run and be safe all through the night and not have to have a buddy drive behind me or whatever? And so he came out of that deal going, yeah, I don't care about that anymore. I stopped and started talking to people and say, why are you here? And they said, well, we drove in from Oklahoma because we wanted to participate in this because we lost our son who was 24 years old. And he goes, I mean, it changed his life. So it's interesting how people come to this, but they all leave kind of haven't had the same experience, which is, wow, people have been carrying the load for us. It's time for us to carry the load for somebody.
So that's obviously been a very consistent theme from the beginning. And you talked about the humility, which honestly is one of the things about this organization that I am just still drawn to and amazed by, really. I mean, when you think of the life expectancy of somebody operating or volunteering inside of a nonprofit, I would say our length of time that we've had people involved is probably, again, somewhat subjective, but probably double the average of most other organizations, which says a lot about the very ethos of the organization. But what I'm really curious is how you would compare that very first event to where we are now. What is we just talked about some strong similarities. What's different in a good way?
Well, the organization, Debbie Wright and her team and the board members and all the volunteers just have it dialed in. And it's just amazing. We couldn't have done it if Rebecca hadn't gotten involved. She really helped, but every year it's just gotten better and better. And so I remember the second year and the third year, every time I showed up, it was like, wow, this is really organized. But now I go back and it's like, whoa. This is like running like a top. So the organization and the attention to detail is just unbelievable. The first year, literally, we didn't know what we were doing. And we had 1/10 the amount of water bottles that we needed. Well, now when the deal's over, there's water bottles going to charities all over the place because we know we need a lot of water. And if we don't use it all, then we can give it away. So,
Yeah, and you know what? And that speaks to some of our sponsors like Pepsi who donates all that water. And you're right. I mean, it's just people have just kind of gotten on board. You mentioned Rebecca. I love that you gave her a shout out whether you realized it or not. And
no,
it speaks to the humility again, because when she got to a point, she said, I've done what I can do with this organization. It's time for me to step aside. And then we get Debbie. And that, again, it's just, I'm like you, I'm so honored to even be a part of it and be associated with it.
yeah, yeah, it's a lot of good people. And, it's just amazing how many people have given of themselves for it. John McKay just joined our board, and when he was at Channel 8, I mean, he did if anyone, I never called him, but when anyone from Carry the Load called him and said, can you do something? Can you MC? Can you say something? He was on board. It's constant. It's just amazing.
So if you could identify one thing, what are you most proud of with this organization, your involvement, what have you? What is the one thing that you point to that you're most proud of about the organization?
I would say the message. We can talk about numbers, and we have to. People who donate money want to know that their numbers are being, that their money's going and making an impact. And we can talk about number of people and number of dollars given away. But I like to bring it down to, if one life is changed, if one life is, it's what I love about the military. We're not going to leave somebody on the field. We're going to go get them. And, if there's one person that we can go get through Carry the Load to make their life better, to let them know that we'll come alongside them and help them carry their load, or make them feel better because we're helping honor their lost one who carried the load for our whole country. To me, that's what I'm most proud of, is that individuals are having a chance to touch something inside of them that might not have been touched if Carry the Load wasn't in existence. So numbers are great, and we're touching a lot of people and giving a lot of numbers, but I'm more proud of those individuals who come away different. And I'm one of them.
Well, you kind of led right into where I was going to finish up with you. I mean, it seems like this has, like many of us, it seems like this has given you more than you feel like you've given the organization. I know I feel that way. And
it's given my family things. It's given me things. It's given me wonderful friends. Todd, I wouldn't know you if it weren't for Carry the Load. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you. And and the other thing too is, we talk a lot about it, or we talk not enough about it, but values and virtue. And the military has that because their life's on the line. They have to value and have to have virtue, because if one guy in a squad doesn't have virtue, the whole squad's going to die. And so I just think that what the military has, and what the police and the fire and all the first responders have, our society needs more of that. And Carry the Load is helping. And the funny thing is I've not one time in 10 years had anyone say to me, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that mission. I don't agree with that. There's a lot of other nonprofits I'm involved in, and people say I have a different stance to that. I don't agree.
Great point.
But Carry the Load is something that this just makes people in our country better. And all we're doing is saying, can you help carry somebody? And if you need help being carried, we'll help carry you. So that's what I love about it, is it crosses all boundaries, political spectrum, ideology spectrum, everything. It's a very human oriented, touching, in a healthy and appropriate way of touching feelings, giving people hugs and telling them I love you. And so it's just wonderful.
So I guess I kind of have to ask you the same question that Clint asked your son, because we're always kind of curious about that. you've gotten to know a lot of people through the years. So who are you carrying?
Yeah. Um, I don't know if I'm carrying Clint well enough, but I'm praying for Clint, and I love him to death. I'm carrying I've been carrying for 10 years, my nephew who was in the Army. Um, he served duty in Iraq and was selected to go to bomb school and went, and out of 32 students in the Army who started, 2 graduated, and he did, and was sent back to Iraq to defuse bombs. And now he's at Stanford University finishing his undergrad. And so for me, that's a wonderful thing to have always for 10 years carried Dylan. And now he is at Stanford University and he's doing really well. And it's really fun to see. But, you know, I'm also carrying my family and my kids, and I'm carrying the people who work at our firm. And what's interesting is the more I focus on that I'm carrying them, the more I realize I can't do that. I'm not good enough, powerful enough, resourceful enough to carry them. I need them to help me. I need them to carry me so that I in turn can carry them. And so, but you know, basically, you know, are we carrying the clerk at the Whataburger who hands our hamburger through the window? How you know, in other words, this permeates everything. And so a kind word to that person, right? Thank you for that. I really appreciate you being here. I couldn't get food on my way to work this morning if you weren't getting up at 4 in the morning to be here and open up the Whataburger. So it's really kind of changed the whole way I look at everything. And that it also bleeds into my personal faith. And so it's just been, I'm just very blessed. So I'm carrying Dylan is my number one guy that I'm carrying. But it's carry the load has helped me figure out how to carry. And then the other thing that we don't talk as much about is it's helped me learn how to be carried. And you have to be humbled to be carried. And that's necessary for all of us because all of us have people who carried us. And so it's helped me in both ways.
You know, you bring up an interesting point, and admittedly, I was starting to kind of, you know, wrap this up, but I'll finish going down this path you just took us down. You know, we're taught in a lot of ways militarily to be very independent, to be the tough guy, and not don't, you know, you have to be able to do it on your own if your buddies aren't to your left or to your right. But really, what you just said is what a lot of us have learned coming out of the military, and that is, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to need others. And I mean, thank you for that reminder, because that is a very important reminder. And that's what I've seen. You know, I've got my own stories from, you know, from the trail, and I've seen a couple of guys that were just really hurting. They were looking for what they had in the military, and they come there and they realize I needed the guy to my left and to my right. And the fact that there are others out here willing, they don't even realize how to do it, but just by being there, they're willing to carry me. That's a great point, Scott. Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, it's just things I've learned from Carry the Load, man. You and Clint, and Stephen, and Debbie, and Rebecca, everybody. It's been fun.
Well, it has been fun here too, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining us and sharing those stories. I can tell you that you absolutely touched my heart by a couple of things that you said today, and you gave me a lot more intelligence than I came into this with. So thank you very much. And
Todd, thanks for doing this. This is important work. Thank you very much.
Well, it's my pleasure. And Scott, thanks for being our first, and this is Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as we kind of, you know, head out of this, I want to remind everybody, you know, in addition to reminding everyone that we are free because of the sacrifices of a lot of people, we also have to give thanks for a lot of folks, maybe, you know, like you said, maybe they didn't serve, but there are still people that are doing things on a daily basis that if we didn't have them, our lives would look very different.
Yeah.
So let's all remember to give thanks this week. And Scott, thanks for joining us. For all of you out there in America watching, thank you very much for being here with us. And remember, always have a good answer to this question: who are you carrying?